being here. I'm Nate Eaton, and welcome to this Idaho Falls City Council Candidate Forum. We are here in our studio live in Idaho Falls. We appreciate you watching. We are streaming this on our Facebook page, on eastidahonews.com, and on our YouTube channel. We're glad to have the candidates here who are running for the two open seats in the city of Idaho Falls. There is one seat that remains uncontested. Michelle Zill-Dingman, an incumbent candidate, is running for that seat. Here on my right, we have Kirk Larson and Barbara Miller, who are both running for the seat. And then on my left, we have John Radford, an incumbent candidate, and Donna Howard. How this is going to work tonight is they will each be given 1 minute to give an opening statement. We will then go into a series of questions, and the candidates can respond 2 minutes. We do have somebody keeping time here, and they will be given a 15-second warning along with a stop sign when it's time to wrap up their answers. And then after about an hour, we will give each of the candidates 2 minutes for a closing statement. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and get started with our opening statements. Donna Howard, we'll start with you if that's all right, and then you'll be followed by John Radford, and then we'll go to Kirk Larson and Barbara Miller.
My name is Donna Howard. I was born and raised in Idaho. About 13 years, I came back to the Idaho Falls area, finished raising my children. I have 3 children, 2 grandchildren. I graduated from ISU in 2001 with a degree in accounting and with an emphasis in auditing. I worked as part of an audited team while at ISU, and then I continued that on a solo basis once I graduated until I became full-time at the post office, which I worked at for over 20 years and resigned in 2021 from that position. In July of 2022, I started Concerned Citizens of Idaho Falls. I just wanted to inform the citizens, good and bad, of what was happening in Idaho Falls, help them understand what was the requirements and what was not.
Thank you, Mr. Radford.
Well, thank you for having us. It's great to be here, and I've been very lucky to be able to serve on the City Council for the last 8 years, and I'm running for re-election because I want to continue the innovative processes that we've started. One of the things we're most proud of, I think, is our fiber network and getting that to every home in the city. We're not there yet, but we will be by next year. It's those kind of things, and our Idaho Falls Power, the processes that the council can help people function their lives with, that I think really makes a difference. I'm also proud that while I've been on the City Council, that the Milliken Institute named Idaho Falls the best performing small city twice. And so I want to continue that effort, and I'm grateful to be here with all of you. Thank you for running, and I know it's not easy.
Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thank you to East Idaho News for the forum. Idaho Falls is a very nice place to live. As John indicated, in recent years it's been deemed the best small city in the United States. As a community, we do a lot of things very well. The challenge is to continue to do those things as we grow. The passage of time and growth both generate changes in our community and changes in the needs of the citizens. City leaders need to stay tuned in with citizens and with their changing needs. There's always room for improvement. This has to be done with a firm commitment to fiscal responsibility. Spending citizen tax dollars is a solemn responsibility. It has to be done with good information and sound judgment. As a city council member, I'll work with citizens, other city council members, department directors, and the mayor to move the city forward so that Idaho Falls will continue to be a great place to live.
Thank you. And Ms. Miller.
I started paying attention, well, we moved to Idaho Falls in 2007, and I did what every citizen basically does, which is raised my family, worked, paid my bills, thought that the city was doing its part, I was doing my part, and then the rug kind of fell out from under everybody with COVID and a lot of the small businesses being shut down and the economy being tanked, and so I started paying attention to what was happening, and I ran across this program that the city of Idaho Falls is implementing called Imagine IF. And it's a comprehensive plan that they are implementing based on 670 survey responses out of 67,000 citizens. So I looked at that and I said, I don't think the proper role of government is to tell the citizens what they want and what they need. I think the citizens should decide that themselves.
All right, thank you. First question, Idaho Falls is experiencing rapid growth. We all know that. One publication named it one of America's top 20 boom towns. I think we were number 13. Have city leaders managed growth responsibly? And what needs to be done in the next 4 years should the trend continue? Mr. Larson, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I think the city's done a good job. We've had double-digit growth for most of the last 100 years on a 10-year basis between census. So managing growth is something that's been with us for a long time. I think some of the key elements that we see right now in managing that growth are transportation, the ability to move people through the city or around the city quickly. We've seen the need to increase, the capacity of city streets. It'd be nice to see if we can get some of that traffic off of city streets and onto perimeter streets where we can move people more efficiently. Another thing that we see is that as we see development, sometimes the process through the city is not as rapid and as convenient, and maybe convenient's the wrong word, but as user-friendly as it might be. And I think there's the potential there to help developers and builders who want to work in the city, to work with the city and do it in a quicker and more efficient manner.
All right, Ms. Miller, same question.
So growth is much easier to manage when the economy is good. I think we're heading into a very difficult economy with high inflation, high interest rates, and that's definitely going to be something to take into consideration with growth on the other end of it. I think a lot of people are coming to Idaho Falls thinking that Idaho Falls is very small town, rural, conservative, and I think that they are surprised when they get here to find that it's not. A lot of the people are not purchasing in the city of Idaho Falls because the taxes are so high, and so they're purchasing in the county thinking that they will be safe from that, but then the city comes along and annexes them, and I think that's very upsetting to them. And a lot of this high-density housing that's going up is also upsetting to a lot of people. I think that more consideration needs to be given at the time that these high-density housings come in to the impact that they have on the surrounding infrastructure and the surrounding residents, and look at who these developers are. A lot of them are out-of-state developers, and they come in and they make big profits on these and then take the profit out of state. And then the taxpayers are left holding the bag, dealing with overburdened sewers, overburdened roads, and things like that. So I think all that needs to be proactively addressed and not reactively addressed by the city.
Councilman Radford?
Growth is a privilege, right? There's many communities around this country that would love to see the kind of growth that we've had and to be a place that people want to move to, just like we've experienced. I will say that one of the things that we need to balance as we try to grow is to keep our character of who we are and to keep the feel of our community. And there's a number of ways that we've worked to do that. Number one, and I think this was long overdue, and I wish could have been in place for a lot of years, is impact fees. So the city, in the recent years, we voted to install impact fees, which will help answer some of the needs that everyone's talked about here. Transportation, we get dollars for roadways when we do impact fees. Everyone who builds a new home will have dollars that goes to building a new road because they are impacting the amount of traffic. That means we'll get more police officers, we'll get more police cruisers. The impact fees help pay for growth. And before, that was just coming out of our general fund budget, which made it this losing scheme because growth wasn't paying for itself over 50 years. Growth came and you'd get these new tax dollars, but then when you have to maintain those roads 25 years from now, then you you don't have enough money because there's no way to get more money from taxpayers other than property taxes. And so impact fees should help with that. The other thing that's going to help with growth over the next few years is the interest rates being a little bit higher. We won't see some of these like explosive kind of subdivisions kind of just coming out of nowhere because those rates are so high, which I think will give us a period to kind of reestablish what rules make most sense so that our growth can be wise. We need growth that connects the community. We need pathways to be connected. We need ways into the community through using bikes, all kinds of things so that we can have a livable, walkable city.
And Ms. Howard.
I believe that growth is important, but there are certain things that need to be in your community to impede that growth. I believe that just because of with my concerned citizens of Idaho Falls, a lot of statistics came into that. And the statistics that I have shown that Idaho Falls has grown. The city of Idaho Falls itself has grown at 8% over the last 10 years. So we can't confuse growth of Bonneville County with growth within the city because they're two different regions. We do need to grow Idaho Falls, but we need to not lose why people live in Idaho Falls and why we love living here. I think it's time to slow down, let what we've already done, let the high density housing, we need to catch that up. We need to catch up our infrastructure. We need to fill those buildings. We need to focus on bringing in the businesses that are going to bring business here. We don't really have anything that is a high wage paying job that allows people to pay what the rent is at the moment. We've kind of priced people out of their homes, priced people out of apartments. I think we need to let that regulate itself. We need to focus on, okay, we've got all this high density housing. Now what are we going to do to fill it? What are we going to do to bring the people here? What kind of jobs can we attract here that's ultimately going to help with the growth of Idaho Falls? And I think we need to do it. You can't grow too fast. We need to grow in stages. And I think that we're on the right track, but I think we need to make sure that we're not going to have empty buildings that are going to not be utilized because we're not bringing the people in and keeping them in our community, and they're branching out to other places where it's less inexpensive for them to live.
Ms. Howard, you mentioned housing, and this leads right into my next question. In 2016, the average price for a home in Idaho Falls was around $160,000. That's according to Zillow. Right now, the average price is around $365,000. What is your role specifically as a city council member in addressing the problem of affordable housing here? And Ms. Howard, we'll start with you.
That's a difficult question, and it's not something that has a quick fix and something that's just gonna, oh, I'm in city council and guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna fix this problem. Because it's a proactive problem and it takes everybody working together. But I believe that one of the first things we have to do, because of my role with Concerned Citizens of Idaho Falls, we are the highest taxed city in, well, I can't say that. Pocatello beat us out in 2023. So we're the second highest taxed city. I think we need to look at that and we need to say, what can we do to reduce maybe this tax effect so that people are not paying so much property tax on their home? And then we need to bring in more single home dwellings instead of the high density. Maybe we can find some low income that will be less expensive for people, because I know people moving here would rather move into houses instead of apartments. If they've sold their house and they've moved here, then they need to be able to move in to a home. So I think we have to start addressing what is making and what impacts and what the city has implemented that is making the tax base a little bit higher, so we can work on maybe getting rid of some of those fees, and then you can get rid of, like, you have to have 3 times the income to rent anything. Well, right now you're looking at almost $4,500 a month to rent anything. Is there a job in Idaho Falls that pays $45 a month? So, or $4,500. So we need to look at ways to increase the wages and maybe bring in, like I said before, the businesses that can pay those kinds of wages and make Idaho Falls more attractive to them, and then we can even out the plateau.
All right, Mr. Radford?
Well, it's a really fascinating dilemma because we all have more value in our homes, right? It's really great to have an asset that grew at that rate, but the dilemma is we need a diversity of housing costs. Right now, there's a large inventory of single-family homes, and that is what most people in Idaho Falls are going to use. And the thing that we can do to increase the ability for the city to have any impact on this is a bit limited, but there are some things we can do. One thing we can do is be a facilitator between the contractors, the developers, and nonprofits, and the other people who are dealing with this issue. We can help teach the contractors and developers what is being asked for in terms of housing and what our businesses are asking for, because what's really at risk here is the ability to actually open businesses and have employees, and then are you going to be able to attract the world-class scientists that we have here in town because of the INL and because of other industries that we have here? I mean, we have an amazing medical industry in Idaho Falls. We're the hub, and because of that, we attract amazing professionals. But those professionals need to work with people who are supporting them, and we need all of these housing that is spread out across the economic spectrum. And right now, what we have is a lot of houses that are worth $300,000 or $400,000. And it gets to what Donna was saying. It's really difficult for a 15-hour or $16 an hour employee to live in that situation. So I think it's going to be our role as a city to be a facilitator to get these conversations going and then help increase inventories, which will then bring down prices over time.
Ms. Miller?
Yes, so should the city council be involved in affordable housing? No. No, I do not believe that that is something that the city or the government should be involved in, other than possibly to keep the taxes low so that people have more money in their pocket to spend on housing. So other than that, they shouldn't, I don't think the government should be teaching contractors or developers how to do their job. I think that private industry is very innovative, and I think you should let them do their job. And the city council should do its job, which is to provide for necessary services for the citizens and stop dabbling in all these social services that are making everybody's taxes go up.
Okay, Mr. Larson.
I did a little research on this too, and I went back to when I was a kid, and in 1960, and I know that was a long time ago, but the average house cost a little over 2 times the average salary. Right now that number's over 5. I think there's a lot of younger folks, married and unmarried, 20-somethings, that really don't want to necessarily own a home. I think the attitude has shifted to some degree. So I think some of the high-density housing probably has some merit, even though there's people that aren't particularly happy about it. The idea that the market will have an impact on that, I think, is very solid. The free market. I'm kind of a Milt Friedman kind of a guy. Nobody's talked about him in a long time, but he was an economist. And if there's too much multifamily housing at too high a price and it doesn't get filled, probably the price of that housing will come down. So to some degree, I have a little faith in the market system. I think some of the things that Mr. Radford talked about have merit. It's a tough situation, but I think we're seeing a shift to some degree in the way young people look at housing. And I think more of them will be interested in some of this apartment living because that fits their lifestyle. They're a little more mobile. They don't tend to get a job and stay in the same job for 20 years, stay in the same city for 20 years, or at least the same part of the city. And they like that flexibility of being able to move around a little quicker. So I'm not sure that it's all a bad idea. I think we'll have to see how it works out.
All right, this next question comes from Daniel. He says, over the past 10 years, my property taxes have almost doubled, creating a financial hardship for my family. Several of you have mentioned that tonight. What would you do to reduce the tax burden created by city spending? Ms. Miller, we'll start with you.
Well, there you go. The proper role of government. What exactly should the government be? It's not the government's job to spend your money for you. It's not the government's job to tell you what you want and what you need. The government's job is to provide essential services, things like police, fire. In our case, we also have public utility and airport, and that's it. They are supposed to lay a framework for the individual to be productive and to keep as much of the fruits of their labor as possible. Not take it from them and tell them we know how to spend it better than you do.
So would you cut things? And what would you cut?
The social things like the social services. And so if you look at, like for example, Mr. Bradford said, we have all these wonderful bike lanes and walkable, and Idaho Falls is very walkable. Please explain to me how somebody is going to walk from Walmart to the south end of town. I do not see that ever happening, especially not in winter, in below zero weather, right, with a foot of snow on the ground, or even ride their bike for that matter. Yes, they're nice things to have, but is that really necessary? You know, and is that really helping the taxpayer? I'll give you an example. Meals on Wheels, okay? Program Meals on Wheels is there for why? To keep elderly citizens in their home. They want to stay in their home, right? And they may not have somebody in the community to help them. So along comes the government and says, we're going to bring you meals, right? The problem is, in order to provide that program, we have to increase your property taxes. And this elderly person who's on a fixed income doesn't have the money to cover that. So now they got free meals, but now they have they're out of their home. So it's the concept of the government helping. You know, what's the scariest words in the English language, right? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
All right, Mr. Larson.
Obviously, nobody likes the idea of taxes going up. In the city, if you look at your tax bill that you get each year, you'll notice the city's number is the biggest, but it's hardly the only one. There's some other contributing factors in there that I think folks need to be aware of. But let's go back. State law says that the city can't raise taxes more than revenues, okay, we're talking with dollars, more than 3% a year. The only thing that doesn't come under that cap is new construction or annexations, okay? They're outside that 3%. So there is a statutory limit on how much the city can raise the actual dollar amount that they bring in each year. I think that it's incumbent upon us to be as frugal as we can be, but you talk about social programs. The thing I would like to put out there is there's quality of life issues. And I've talked to several people within the city and outside the city. When a business talks to them about moving to Idaho Falls, almost invariably the first thing they ask about are quality of life issues. They don't ask about tax issues, they ask about quality of life issues. And I think that's part of the reason Idaho Falls has grown as much as it has, is because they've been very careful with their dollars, but they've been able to add to the quality of life.
Let me follow up too and ask you the same question. Is there anything you see now that you would cut?
You know, I haven't dug deep into it. It's a complex thing. I watched some of the budget process that the city went through just a few weeks ago and watched the departments. I've talked to pretty much all the department heads. I can't nail anything right now that would amount to enough money to really make a significant impact.
Okay. Not Congressman, Council.
I got a promotion.
Almost.
Tell me the question one more time.
The question was, over the past 10 years, my property taxes have almost doubled, creating a financial hardship for my family. What would you do to reduce the tax burden created by city spending?
So that's a great question, a great point. I'm a property tax payer in Idaho Falls. I want property taxes to be as low as possible and still have the quality services and the first responders. I will tell you that there's two things that have driven his taxes up. The first thing is the value of his home. And unfortunately, in the state of Idaho, we have the homeowner's exemption that has not increased. It's not unfortunate that we have it, it's unfortunate that it hasn't kept pace. So when I bought my house here, my homeowner's exemption was $100,000, then it increased to $125,000, and my home was only worth $170,000, $180,000. So I was only paying taxes on $60,000. My tax bill was in the $1,300 range. That number has stayed at $125,000 now, the homeowner's exemption, but my house now is worth almost $400,000, and now I'm paying taxes on $200,000, and that's why my tax dollars have went up. The levy in Idaho Falls has went from 0.0089 to 0.005. We have cut the levy in half because of the 3% issue. The state says we cannot raise taxes more than 3% in any given year. So when we get more money from increased property values, we push those dollars back and we reduce the levy for everyone. If we had been paying taxes at the property tax level of 0.0089 like we would have 4 or 5 years ago, my taxes would have been in the $4,000 to $5,000 range. My taxes ended up this year at like $2,800 or $3,000, which is still too much if we could avoid it. But the answers really lie in two places. One is let's increase that homeowner's exemption to always be half of the value of a home, so that everyone's getting a benefit and the people at the lower end get more of a benefit. And the other thing we should do is we should cap property tax increases for anyone who's on a fixed income and Social Security and allow them to keep the tax rate they've been at, and then we'll end up at that spot where at the end of their life and they sell their home, then the county can come and take the difference so that the counties and the state is made whole.
I'll follow up, John, with the same
You bet.
question. You just went through the budget process. Is there anything you feel that could have been cut?
Yes, we have. One of the things that I voted against this last budget this year because I feel like we have too many full-time employees and not enough dollars to support those full-time employees. And so we have called to kind of put a stop on some of those hirings until we can get everyone whole and we can bring wages up for everyone so that it's competitive so we can attract the best employees. And then we should try to contract out services to save some of the money that we're spending on benefits and insurance. That would be a savings for taxpayers. And then we should look at any non-essential services. We should always protect the first responders, and then everything else needs to be on the table.
Ms. Howard.
Okay, you're gonna think that I took my notes right out of Radford's playbook because we do
We go to
have
the
a
same
lot.
meetings, right?
We do. We attend the same meetings, and he actually shares information with me. So a lot of what I've learned has come from Mr. Radford. I agree with having to higher the tax exemption status on homeowners. I think that's something that hasn't been revisited. Property tax in itself is complicated, and it's going to take more than what we can do in the city. But because I have an auditing degree, and I'm all about, I will act for the city of Idaho Falls, accountability, communication, transparency. I feel that there probably are quite a few things that could be cut in budgets that would not be necessary. In talking to people in the community, I will give you an example. And this was before I started following the city, so it's just an example that someone gave. All of the beautification signs that they have put on the exits, was that necessary? Was that money that we could have put into a first responder budget so that we can have adequate employees and retain them? Because the backbone of any community is the first responders. If you don't have adequate first responders, that increases crime. How does that attract people to your city if you have a high crime rate? So because of my auditing and my auditing ability, and I did not follow the budgeting process like this year like I did last year, so I'm not aware of a whole lot of things that happened in this budgeting process, but I was very involved in last year's budgeting process. So I would like to actually look at the books of every department and see, and like he said, look at employees. Do we have, like I worked for the federal government, we would have 4 people do an inspection on our building. 1 would inspect and 3 would sit and have breakfast. Is that what we need to pay for?
Let me follow up with you, Donna, with the same question. You mentioned the signs. Anything else that you would cut off the top of your head?
I think a signage and making your community beautiful, that's okay. But is it at the expense of our first responders? Is it at the expense of our police department? Is it at the expense of of like the municipals or the zoo employees. I mean, who are we cutting to put those signs in when we could be utilizing the departments that we have and making sure that they are running at full capacity so we can keep those areas, because we're the only place that has a really cool zoo. So, you know, maybe we need to be seeing what we can do to better the zoo and give them the money that they need so they don't have to call in volunteers. So I think we could find ways to allocate and still make our city welcoming and beautiful and the way that, you know, what we all fell in love with, and that's why we all live here.
Okay. Many cities in Idaho meter water, meaning you pay for what you use. Idaho Falls is not one of those cities. Do you believe water meters should be implemented here? Councilman, we'll start with you.
Thank you. That's a great question, and one we've struggled with and spent a lot of time talking about. All things equal, I would love to keep things where they are, but we have been told, we've hired professionals to look at this, and the word is that it's going to be much more expensive to build more wells to keep up with the usage than it would be to put in meters and try to have people act more responsibly. And let me give you an example. We sprinkle in the city of Idaho Falls so many lawns that when we run the city day to day in January, we only use 3 water wells. We only have 3 wells running in the winter. We have 19 wells that run during the summer to keep the grass green. So, and some people are very good about buying the latest things and having the most efficient use of water, and they know when to water so that we don't lose to evaporation. But others just aren't incentivized to do that because they can run their sprinklers all night if they want, because we don't have meters. We are the largest city west of the Mississippi without meters. And we use more water in Idaho Falls than almost all. We are by far the largest water user in Idaho, bigger than Boise, which doesn't make sense for our size and what we're doing. So I think inevitably it's going to cost more if we don't build it, because we'd have to build more wells and more infrastructure, which would cost more money than just implementing the meters. Having said that, I don't want the meters. I also don't want the meters to cost $400 or $500 to keep your grass green, which is what we hear out of California and what we hear out of Boise, that it can be $300 or $400 or $500 a month to keep your grass green. In our conversations, we've worked hard with the water department to make sure that if we do have water meters, that they would be very low levels of cost, meaning we could be in that $50 or $60 just to have an incentive. But honestly, just having water meters and getting a bill back telling you what it is stopped water usage in Utah. It saved 30% of the water in these cities.
Ms. Howard?
If you're talking about digital water meters, that's a conversation that I've had with people out in the community. Some who, you know, what are the pros and cons? Some are against, some are for. For the people that have gotten it, I have seen an increase in their water bill. And the people who are living on an income, like for example, my aunt, we have to make sure that she's eating every day, because what is she giving up? Because she can't buy food. And so the digital water meters has increased her utility bill. So I'm not saying that it's good or bad. There's pros and cons to both. Yes, I think that there are people who could probably manage their water better, but it needs to be an opt-in situation. If they choose to go to a water meter, that's their choice to choose to do that, because everybody knows what's best for their family, what's best for them financially, and what's best to move on. There are some, you know, utility companies do offer water conservation classes. We could put them out in the community, get people to maybe attend and learn how they could cut back on their water usage and maybe not water the street when they're watering their grass, or maybe not make the weeds grow in the crack of the sidewalk and just keep the water on their grass. So I think there are different things that we could probably utilize before we bring in this whole digital water meter system that, I mean, most people are not really looking forward. And I did attend that water meeting class, the meeting that they had among the city. There was 4 people in that meeting, and it was phenomenal. I mean, the things that they said, and so my part of my platform is communication. We need to get people to start showing up, to start attending these meetings, and to start being aware so they can make these informed decisions for themselves and not be forced to do something that they were not educated about, and it just gets implemented.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
I'd like to go back to what Councilman Bradford spoke about, and that is that when you run the dollars and cents, I'm a spreadsheet kind of a guy, and when you run the dollars and cents, it'll cost a lot more to build wells and infrastructure than it will to put in meters. I have children that live in areas that have been forced to cut back on water simply because there is not enough. And to see the change in mindset, I'll be honest, a little bit maybe like John in some respects, I'm a real grass guy. You know, my wife does the flowers, we share the trees, and I do the grass, and I love green grass. But if I really like green grass, I need to get my checkbook out. Ultimately, we're all going to have to get our checkbooks out to build more wells, to build more infrastructure. So the question is, what makes the most sense in how we use our money? And I think the thing that makes the most sense is meters.
Ms. Miller.
So I grew up in California. Water's always been an issue in California. So I am very familiar with water monitoring, metering, conservation. There's a couple aggravating factors with that, or issues with that. One is that all the people are supposed to conserve water, right? But then they're dumping water out of their rivers and stuff and into the ocean. And so here's everybody trying to conserve while the government is just dumping it, or trying to save little tiny fishes or something. So, I mean, you really have to look at that and say, okay, so long as everybody is on board with this, right, and is treated equally, not just the little people at the bottom. Then you also look at things like low flow, okay? If you've ever dealt, and I think it's come into Idaho Falls actually, low flow shower heads, low flow toilets, okay? You have to flush it 5 times for it to actually flush. So have you really saved anything? Or even low flow to your washing machine and things like that, right? So now you have to, again, wash it 5 times to get it clean because you can't get, so have you ultimately really saved anything is the question. Then I think you need to look at things like, what about gray water? Can we use gray water for lawns? You know what I mean? And well water for inside housing water. Why can't we look at things like that? You know, why did we just automatically go to, oh, we have to meter, there's nothing else we can do? Can we not look at some other alternatives maybe and really actually look at, is it going to save anything in the long run? That's what I would do.
Okay. Next question comes from Brenda. Traffic has gotten worse over the years and only seems to be more and more congested, especially with all the projects this summer. What are your plans to improve this problem? Why don't we start with Ms. Howard?
I do think that the congestion did come because every major intersection was closed in Idaho Falls this year. And so they would take side roads. I think it's with the improvement of the intersections and making them bigger, I do think that is going to alleviate a lot of the traffic problems. And because I don't know what the scope of the city is, some stoplights stay red for way too long. So maybe we can shorten stoplight times so that we can get more people through instead of having these big long lines, and now we're at this stoplight and we still have a line, and we're at this stoplight and we still have a line. We could improve the speed of how the stoplights change so we can get more people through an intersection faster and not have so much backlog. And like, you know, doing a traffic study and watching the traffics, I think that they did do, you know, some major improvements on some high impact traffic areas this summer. So I think maybe we need to just wait it out and see how that alleviates the problem. But I mean, it's not gonna hurt to, you know, do some studies and look and see. I will tell you that I don't think roundabouts are the answer. That's just I think we can direct traffic without having to put in roundabouts to do so. That's just where I don't have the answers to every question, and this is something that I haven't really had in the back of my mind. So this is just, things that I can just think of right now off the top of my head.
Okay, Mr. Radford?
Well, one of the first things we've done, and I think is really critical to understand, is that we hired a traffic engineer who works full-time now. We didn't used to have that. We used to rely on engineers from the Idaho Department of Transportation. And so having a full-time traffic engineer has helped with some of our corridors, things like getting the lights coordinated on 17th Street. I will be honest with you, computer power and AI are going to help traffic flow better, because we're going to be able to have our lights tied to AI and make transitions immediately, even if things are backed up. Like the future of traffic in Idaho Falls will be better because of the computing power and the connection and the fiber networks that we've put everywhere. Every stoplight in the city of Idaho Falls is connected to fiber. So that will all improve over time. But let's just be really clear about traffic and growth. The answer isn't more lanes, because if it was, LA would be a great place to drive. Or going to Boise, and where they've been widening the interstate for 20 years, and now it's worse than ever because there's just more cars. Because what happens when you build more lanes and make it easier is cars are like, oh, that's a great way to get there, and we'll get there faster if we go through the interstate. And then you get all this traffic jams. And so the answer long-term is to have better transportation infrastructure, meaning have some sort of bus system so that not everyone's in a car. One thing that we have to do also is build situations where we don't have to get in our car to go to Walmart to get milk. Like every trip is you have to get in a car. And our cities used to be built in the east. You could go down to the bodega and get a carton of milk by getting on your shoes and walking down and buying a gallon of milk. In Idaho Falls, you've got to get in your car, and then you're adding to the traffic problem. So I think we need to look at our planning and zoning to a certain extent and see if we can't get more stores near these places that people live, where they can actually just maybe walk and get some of these things, cut trips that way. So those are some of my thoughts around traffic. What we don't have is a lot of dollars to make the fixes that might be easy. And so we're going to have to do a lot of work coordinating with the Bonneville Metropolitan Planning Association and get the right belt loop, get everything working so we can get people out of the interior core and get people moving efficiently.
Ms. Miller?
So traffic, Los Angeles, yes. I don't even like to go back and visit. It's that bad. I would have to agree as far as the big box stores. So you have to get in your car to drive to Walmart and get your gallon of milk, because during COVID, when we closed businesses down, we killed a bunch of the little small businesses, but we allowed the big ones to stay open. So I think that could have been avoided, and then we'd still have a lot of these little mom and pop stores. I think mom and pop stores are really the small town feel that supposedly people move here for. So I'd like to see more of those. And I think that really should be like included in like the development. So again, go back to develop a lot of the traffic congestion. That comes from, okay, we're gonna put this development in here. Well, what effects is it gonna have? What impact is it gonna have? Let's look at that. Let's talk to residents. Let's bring people in and let's talk to them and be proactive as opposed to reactive, which is basically how it's been handled. It's like, we put all these high density housings in everywhere, and now, oh my goodness, we have all this congestion type of thing. It's like, was that not foreseeable? Could we not have thought about that ahead of time? So I think it will play itself out some if that slows down, and with some of those improvements that have been made. So as far as alleviating it with public transportation, okay. Instead of the government getting into public transportation, why don't we stop taxing the taxis so much to put them out of business? And why don't we let the Ubers and the taxis do that?
Okay, Mr. Larson.
I have a cousin that's in her mid-80s, and I was talking to her about this the other day, and she said it was frustrating all summer long. But she said, I drove through the intersection at the corner of 17th and Woodruff. She said, it was marvelous. She said, that works so well. So there's a little kudo. I look at other cities, and I'm not trying to say we need to do it exactly like they do it, but I think there's some situations. I look at Salt Lake, for example. They still struggle with getting people east-west, but the north-south, they've built high volume. They're not freeways, but I mean, you've got Bangor Highway. You do have the 215, which is a freeway. You have Mountain View Corridor. They've figured out how to put places that collect, maybe that's the right term, is collectors, to gather people. Part of our traffic situation is, it's not a huge portion, but maybe more than we think, is that we're a hub. And a lot of folks that live in the county, that live in Rigby, that live in Shelley, come here to work, to shop, to get medical care, to go to events, those kinds of things. They could come in and use these collectors. You know, somebody coming from the Upper Valley that wants to get to the west side, you know, right now they can use the freeway, but, I mean, the highway that comes in. But build those kinds of facilities that would allow for traffic to kind of be focused in those areas instead of on city streets.
This is a question that just came in live from Michael. What is the biggest issue you see within the city and a potential solution to bring to the table for that issue? Ms. Miller, we'll start with you.
Wow. Okay, the biggest issue with the city. Well, again, it's got to be how to deal with the growth or the fallout from the growth that we've had if it's going to slow down, right? And on the one end, and on the other end, the economy. Because we have, everybody is feeling the inflation, the high interest rates. So it's much easier, like I said before, to deal with growth and things like that, or to deal with programs, the feel-good programs that you want to put out there, if the economy is good. Then there's plenty of money, that's okay, everybody's doing great. But when there's a limited amount of money, and I think that's where my experience as a private business owner and having to budget and having to say, yes, I have the money to do this, no, we can't do this, it would be nice, but it'll have to wait. I think that would be super helpful, and that's exactly what the city council needs to do, is to look through it and say, we would love to do this, and this is a great thing, but it is not necessary, and right now nobody's in a position financially to be paying for that. So that's what I think the biggest thing facing the city is that the pinch from both ends, you know, of the greater need, but yet on the other hand, the fact that the economy is going to be so bad, and they're going to have to figure out, you know, how to tighten the belt. Like, for example, raises. My understanding is the city council all got raises. Okay? Private business owner pays themselves last, right? All their employees get paid, their customers are taken care of, but the owner gets paid last. In this case, city council, they all got raises. So,
Mr. Larson?
I think this, if you have to boil it down to one item, I'd have to go with growth as well. And how to manage that. It's a delicate balance because it's a complex issue. And I'm not trying to hide, I just think that it's a complex issue and takes complex answers. Part of the problem is that, like I said, we have communities from outside the area feeding into Idaho Falls, and we don't have revenue other than mostly like sales tax revenue, which unfortunately goes all to the state. We don't get any of that money to deal with that. I think to Barbara's point about being wise in how we spend money, I think that's exactly right. You know, we have to get good information and then use wisdom and judgment in how we spend money. But to stop growth, you know, we can't, the city has no impact on inflation or on raising interest rates or those kind of things. But as the citizens, if they see a real downturn in their incomes, the city has to be aware of that and do what they can to help. I don't know what that is, to be honest with you, because so much of what the city has is infrastructure. And you can't just shift gears on a water system or a police department or a fire department or even things like Parks and Rec. You know, you can't just quit taking care of facilities. You still have to take care of them.
Mr. Radford?
So I appreciate all of those issues, and they're all really, there's no question that they're critical. I just think that the issue that's on the forefront of everyone's mind, and probably the one thing that we definitely need to solve, is property tax. Number one, it's just unfortunate that the state of Idaho is still functioning on the basis of property taxes. That's a Byzantine era principle. There's better ways to fund government at this point. Even the state legislature has got a committee right now trying to figure out what to do to replace the property tax system. And there's a number of people that are looking at that. It is really not fair to fund government on the backs of a widow on Canyon Street here in Idaho Falls who doesn't have any ability to pay those property taxes, and she's choosing between buying medicine or choosing to buy food or to save for her property tax bill that's due at the end of the year. That shouldn't be true. And so, as I said earlier, there's a couple of things we need to do right away. We need to increase the homeowner's exemption. That's out of the city's purview, but we can influence and we can try to fight for that with our elected representatives to the state. We need to cap property taxes for seniors who are on fixed incomes, and then let us recover those dollars for the city and the county later when on the sale of their property. And then let's find a way to fund government in a better way than property taxes. I'll give you an example. There's a couple of things that other states are doing. One is a tax on Amazon deliveries per package. Right now, the state of Pennsylvania did that and gathered $1 billion in revenue in 1 year. We are paying for the traffic on our streets. Our police are searching for the packages that are being stolen off the porches. Those are all costing dollars in our city. And Amazon's not paying property taxes in the city right now. They're in the county. And so they're freeloading off of the city of Idaho Falls. And then we have these poor older folks who can't even make their payments. So we need to do better. We need to be more equitable.
Thank you. Ms. Howard?
I think that the biggest issue that's affecting the city of Idaho Falls is lack of first responders. I know that they're understaffed. I know that they're underpaid. And I know that East Idaho News ran an article that we are like #1 of the worst places to be at night in the state of Idaho. Well, correlation with crime is having an adequate first responder. So my focus would be, where can we cut to make sure that we grow, to make sure we cut down on crime, to make us more desirable to people to live here, because nobody wants to come live in the #1 worst place to be at night. And addressing, as I have been canvassing areas and speaking to people, and through my involvement with Concerned Citizens of Idaho Falls, there are a lot of people who don't like that their streets are dark. They would like to see implementing of street lights. They said, we don't want to see the people who are motion activating our lights right in front of our house. We'd like to see them 5 houses down so we know that they're coming, so we can better police our areas better. I've even thought about implementing a citizens watch, a neighborhood watch, to try to eliminate, because if we want to facilitate growth, which we do, to facilitate the high density housing and try to bring more businesses in here, that's not going to happen if we don't find a way to cut back on the crime, make our streets light so we can actually see there is a really strange car, those kids are getting in and out of the car, so we can be proactive at that moment before it gets to the point where they're at our house breaking our window or tagging our mailboxes or taking our decorations off of our lawn. So I believe that the most important thing we need to focus on is making sure we have an adequate first responder staff.
Thank you. We have so many questions coming in. Unfortunately, we are wrapping up. We even have questions coming in from England on our YouTube channel.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
Thank you for watching in England. And I imagine all of these.
That English.
Yes. I imagine all of these candidates will be happy to take your answers if you email them or contact them on social media. We thank you all for participating in this forum tonight. We're going to give you each 2 minutes for a closing statement. And Ms. Howard, we will start with you.
So my tagline and my forum that I am running on is I will act for the city of Idaho Falls. ACT is accountability, communication, transparency. I have noticed in attending meetings that sometimes they are given packets of information that they haven't even had time to read. And they're having a discussion and they want to vote. Part of my communication, accountability, transparency, I will not vote on anything that I have not read, that I do not thoroughly understand, and that I have not had a chance to take to the community for responses. It is my job as an elected official to represent the people that elected me. And that's where the communication comes in. I have put in several public requests for budget items, for line budget items. Those things I have never received. I believe that the city needs to be way more transparent on what the money is being sent on and spent on, so that the citizens have the right to look up and say, this is what was spent this month. I understand that several years ago, line item budgets were part of the agenda. I would like to bring that back. I think it's important that the taxpayers see if our spending is following what they expect, or if there is some unnecessary stuff that we can cut out and better represent the people, the taxpayers that live here. I will always be available to reach out. I want to be the member of the community who is your friend, who is your neighbor. It doesn't matter where you live. I want to be the person that you feel confident, that you have the trust in, that you know that I will listen to you and that you will be heard.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Bradford.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate you and appreciate East Idaho News and what they do for the community. Appreciate everyone here as candidates, and it's a difficult thing to run for office, to put yourself out in front of people, and I'm really grateful that you all are willing to do that. I will also say that it's really critical that we govern with the people, because it is disheartening to go to city council meetings and see those rooms empty, and they're almost always empty. And it's unfortunate, because the things that are going to impact your life the most are happening in those meetings, probably not in DC. And so I just want to reiterate that I have this desire to serve because we've been able to do innovative things. The city of Idaho Falls, we have a history of innovation. We are innovators. We got the lab in the 40s and 50s. We started a power company in the early 1900s. And the river is the source of our energy. It's the source of our character. It's the source of who we are. It's the source of our beauty. And I want us to match that as a council and as a community. And the other reason I want to serve is to continue this conversation about how we can innovate into the future. What is it that are the next steps that we can be the pioneers, the innovators? And we are on the cusp of a new generation with the computing power that's coming and all of the things that are happening. We need to be a smart city that takes advantage of AI and automation to save money for taxpayers, so that we don't have to pay as many folks to do the menial task, and we can put them to work doing things that actually make a difference in the city. I also just want to make sure that as we continue forward, that we represent the people that we care about. And we need to build this sense of community. The city of Idaho Falls is one of the great places in this country. And we get to live in the Yellowstone country, in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and we have some of the most amazing scientists. We are on the brink of, the lab is probably one of the top cybersecurity sites in the world, and we have all this ahead of us. We need to be innovative just like they are.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate the same thing as far as thank you for hosting this. This is very beneficial. Good information leads to good decisions. And that information can come from a lot of sources and needs to come from a lot of sources. Talking with taxpayers, ratepayers, people that are impacted by the decision, as well as just the citizenry at large. Also getting information from department heads, from other council members. There's lots of good sources of information. So as we gather that information and then make informed decisions, I think that's critical. And I'm not advocating that it doesn't happen now. I think it does. But I think we need to continue that, and you know, the way we live our lives now is so much different than the way we lived it 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So we need to be aware of that, particularly as you look at younger people and how they have grown up and how they view things. We need to involve those folks and get information from them so we know what they are looking at and what they want moving forward. Another thing I'd like to mention just in closing is the value of public-private partnerships. We look at things that go back as far as the Green Belt, the Riverwalk, and what a great asset that has been. That's taken a river that was covered in construction and cement plants and turned it into an actually beautiful part of the city that attracts a lot of people, brings a lot of people here, to a more current thing, and that is the Mountain America Center. And that took no money from the city. The city didn't have anything to do with that. But it's nonetheless, it's a public-private partnership. And I think they're just finishing up their first year of operation. And I think, from what I hear from them, that it's been a very great year, that it's been very successful, that a lot of people come there. A lot of people come from out of the area, again, that concept of a hub. And they come in and they buy dinner and they shop. So there's benefits to that. So I think that, one, gathering good information from large numbers of groups that are stakeholders, and public-private partnerships.
Thank you. And Ms. Miller.
So I am running for this position because I want to be the voice of the 99% of the people that did not respond to the Imagine IF survey, that thought that the government does not need to get involved in taking care of everybody and fixing everybody's problems and controlling everybody. I felt that with my background, having grown up in California, which we know is a socialist utopia, and seeing the path that the city of Idaho Falls is going down, which is that path, I think that that is helpful to have that information and to say, no, we don't want to take this path because this is where it's going to lead. This is the end of this road if we get on it. And this is the road that I see us heading when you have government that says, we know what you want. We're going to tell you what you want and what you need. And then we are going to provide those needs for you with your money because we know better than you how to spend your money. And what happens, unfortunately, when the government gets involved in all these social areas is it breaks the fabric of society. Normally you have somebody reciprocating, I have a need, how can we help each other? And that creates a connection between individuals, and that's what builds a community and a society. Then you have the government come and insert itself into that, and that breaks that connection, and it rips apart the fabric of our society. And that's what I see happening, and I just would like to see if we can stop that.
Barbara Miller, Kirk Larson, John Radford, and Donna Howard, thank you all for being here. If we had an audience, I'd ask for a round of applause. Election Day is November 7th.
Each other.
There you go.
We all did really good. We all did really good answers.
Thank you all for participating. You can read about these candidates. They've each completed a questionnaire that we've sent them. We've posted those on eastidahonews.com. If you go to the East Idaho Elects section, just scroll down. You can read a little bit more about their platforms. Thank you, and thank you all for watching. Have a good night.